Hello and welcome back to top10list.org, where you get a world of knowledge in 10 simple points. On today's episode, we're going to talk about top 10 arcade games of all time. I'm going to really enjoy this episode with you guys, so let's start at number 10 with Space Invaders. Space Invaders is an arcade game designed by Tomohiro Nishikado and was released in 1978. It was originally manufactured and sold by Taito in Japan, and it was later licensed for production in the United States by the Midway Manufacturing Company. Space Invaders is one of the earliest shooting games, and the aim is to defeat waves of aliens with laser cannons to earn as many points as possible. It was the most popular game in the starting days of arcade gaming. Number 9 is Defender. Defender is an arcade video game developed and released by Williams Electronics in 1980. It was a shooting game featuring two-dimensional graphics. The game is set on a fictional planet where the player must defeat waves of invading aliens while protecting astronauts. It was a simple but very popular game of the early 80s. The player controls a spaceship flying either to the left or the right, and the objective is to destroy alien invaders while protecting astronauts on the landscape from abduction. Number 8, a classic on this list, is Mortal Kombat. Mortal Kombat is a 1992 fighting video game developed and published by Midway Entertainment. In 1993, home versions were released by Acclaim Entertainment. It was the first title in the Mortal Kombat series. Mortal Kombat became one of the most popular arcade games upon its release. Mortal Kombat is a story of a monk who sets out to save the Earth from all evils in a martial arts tournament. There is a series of fights, and the monk has to win all of the fights to move forward. This was a very popular arcade game of all time that has spawned movies, web series, and television shows. Number 7 is Asteroids. Asteroids was released in 1979 by Atari, and it was one of the most popular and influential games of the golden age of arcade. Asteroids uses a vector display in a two-dimensional view, and the objective of Asteroids is to score as many points as possible by destroying asteroids and flying saucers. The player controls a triangular-shaped ship that can rotate left and right, fire shots straight forward, and thrust forward. It's a simple shooting game and was one of the best of all time. Number 6 is Galaxian. Galaxian is a fixed shooter arcade game developed by Namco in the year 1979. This game was marketed by Midway Manufacturing Company and was the most popular game of the time. It is a prequel to Galaga and was the first of its kind of a shooter of that genre. The gameplay was relatively simple. Groups of alien armies attack the player's ship that move left and right, and at the bottom of the wraparound screen. The ship could only have one shot at a time, and the objective is to not get destroyed by the aliens' attack. At number 5, a personal favorite on my list, is Street Fighter II. The Street Fighter II was launched in the year 1991 as a sequel to the original Street Fighter, which was launched in '87. This was developed and marketed by Capcom, great in the video game industry, and it was very popular among the masses. In this time, the player engages opponents in one-on-one close-quarter fighting combat and a series of best 2 out of 3 matches. The objective of each round is to deplete the opponent's vitality before the timer runs out. Number 4 is Mrs. Pacman. Mrs. Pacman was a sequel to Pacman and launched in the year 1981. It was also manufactured by Midway, and Mrs. Pacman is very similar to the original. This game introduces a female protagonist, new maze designs, and several minor gameplay changes over the original. The game became one of the most popular video games of all time. Number 3 is Star Wars. Star Wars is one of the most popular arcade games produced by Atari, and it was released in the year 1983. It is a rail shooter genre game and has a single player mode. In this game, the player does not have to destroy every enemy in order to advance through the game. He must simply avoid or destroy the shots that enemies fire. Each hit on his craft takes away 1 shield of the 6 he starts with, and if he runs out of shields and takes another hit, the game ends. The player's ultimate goal is to destroy the Death Star through 3 attack phases. Number 2 is Galaga. Galaga is a fixed shooter arcade game developed in the year 1981 by Namco. It was distributed in Japan by Namco and in North America by Midway. The gameplay of Galaga puts the player in control of a spaceship which is located on the bottom of the screen. At the beginning of each stage, the area is empty, but over time, enemy aliens fly in formation, and once all the enemies arrive on screen, they will come down at the player's ship in different formations. The objective is to score as many points as possible by destroying insect-like enemies. Last but not least on our list for arcade greats is Pacman. Pacman was one of the most popular arcade games of all time, developed in 1980 by Namco and was licensed for distribution by Midway. Pacman is often credited with being a landmark in the video game history and is among the most famous arcade games of all time. It falls under the genre labyrinth and maze games, and the player controls Pac-Man through a maze, eating dots. When all dots are eaten, Pac-Man is taken to the next stage. 4 enemies, Blinky, Pinky, Inky, and Clyde, roam the maze trying to catch Pacman. If the enemy touches Pacman, a life is lost. When all lives have been lost, the game ends. Well, that concludes our list for top 10 arcade games of all time. If you enjoyed this throwback edition of Top 10, don't forget to click subscribe and join us again for another episode.